So this first video is on how drinking almost destroyed my life. My name is Nicholas McGee. I am 28 years old, and for a time there, I was definitely an alcoholic, to say the least. So I started drinking all the way back in high school, pretty much. And that came from interest, honestly, because I found out that you could pretty much manufacture it by getting Welch's grape juice, some yeast, and some sugar, putting that all into a container and letting that ferment, basically, which is pretty much prison wine, prison alcohol, which I found out later. But just, I had an interest that grew from watching people make the real stuff from grapes, and wanted to also have a taste of it. I guess it didn't necessarily come from wanting to get as wasted as possible at that point in my life, at least. After that point, I would drink on the weekends and clubbing, parties. I'd get a Four Loko or two and split it between a few friends and drink. And it was still pretty fun at that time. It was a corner store near where I lived at that would sell the stuff and not really ID, so therefore we could get as much as we wanted to. Definitely risky behavior there. Pretty sure I was drunk or close to it, driving from place to place, partying, but nothing too wow happened whenever I was still in high school. So after that point, towards the end of, let's say, 12th grade, I took a little bit of a dip just because I wasn't at school in the party scene as much. I was more thinking about what I wanted to do after school, and that ended up being the Air Force, military, which I ended up spending 4 years in. So I went off to basic, nothing there, got through, went to tech school, and things went to 1,000 in comparison to the little bit that I was doing in high school. Most of what I was doing in high school was either from what I already told you, some homemade wine but a certain percentage, and a Four Loko here, which is somewhat a high percentage, but I think it's only 4% really, or 6%, one of the two. We were drinking straight liquor in there. One of the things that we did was take water bottles and pour the water out and put liquor into the water bottles so that they would pass inspection, because in your dorm room you can of course have water bottles, but you can't have liquor. Well, what looks like liquor. And so that's one of the things that we did, which I'm pretty sure has been a thing that people have talked about in the past. Not much happened there. Definitely a few parties got out of control, but nothing that really involved me at that time. And then we go into getting out of training and getting into your duty station, basically. And there, things somewhat stabilized, but there were definitely massive parties in the dorms there. Things getting wild. I wasn't one of the ones, but people would be throwing stuff out of the freaking the top tier of the place that the dorms, basically, in their little conference room or kitchen room where everybody could gather. Basically, it would be some of the wildest parties I had ever seen in there. And drinks were flowing, everybody was having a good time. Getting there in those 4 years, or the first few months, let's say, I wasn't 21 yet, if I'm not mistaken, at that time. So I could always access it from everyone who I was around. There was no shunning of it. If anything, there was that culture. Just drink. Drink and think about it later. But, you know, still great times for the most part. So later on in my time there, I started dating my now wife, and we would hang out, go place to place. I'm pretty sure she probably immediately caught on to some of my drinking habits, because at that time I had been clubbing, and I was stationed up in Alaska, if I didn't mention my duty station at Elmendorf Air Force Base. So we'd go out as well, one another, have fun, maybe bring a bottle of Sky or something like that back to the dorms. And it was still pretty great. I mean, of course, you know, in that partying time period, there was always the embarrassing throwing up in someone's back seat and maybe having to come pick it up a night later, or, you know, all the stupidity that comes with being drunk, all the times that you need to get up and take a piss, or you feel like a squeezed out sponge, basically, from drinking too much. And so then me and my soon-to-be or future wife, as we were dating, took a trip to Arizona. And I ended up getting a DUI that time. During that period, I let my shop supervisor know what was going on. Got back to Alaska after that trip was over, which it pretty much ruined the rest of the trip. How can you really sit with that, knowing that there's a lot of stuff coming down on your career side as well as legality side, all at the same time, of course. And not to mention the fact that a DUI will cost you an arm, a leg, a few fingers on the other arm. Like, don't get a DUI. It is expensive as hell. But so got back, almost got kicked out pretty much from the Air Force for that, but they luckily let me stay in. And after that point, getting out, transitioning out of the military to the civilian world, drinking really, it held me back in a lot of the ways that I was thinking, and a lot of the stuff that I was doing, and the way that I was treating my now wife, because we had been married before I had gotten out of the military. We were still married, and it was rough trying to just get that out the way, make that stop making me make bad decisions. But I was able to stop drinking through thinking about basically my family, what I wanted the future to be of my family here, especially getting out of the military, not necessarily having a stable paycheck anymore. And what do I really want to do? So hopefully this video helps. I do plan to make one about how I was actually able to stop and kind of go into depth more on that part and not just the negatives that alcohol had in my life. See you then.